Hello and welcome to Written Words, and today's video, which is from our regional English series, and we're going to be travelling back to my homeland of Yorkshire. In this lesson we're going to explore Yorkshire's historical and cultural heritage. We're going to take a little look at the Yorkshire accent and dialect, and we're going to look at how Emily Brontë and James Herriot portray the Yorkshire dialect in their writing. Yorkshire, for anyone who is not familiar with it, is a county or an administrative region in the north of England to the north and the west of the River Humber. Its beautiful scenery, which includes moorland, hills, dales, dry stone walls, limestone scenery, and some stunning stretches of coastline, have earned the nickname God's Own County. The area has a long and interesting history, from ancient times to the present day, with Celts, Romans, Anglo-Saxons, Vikings and Normans all making their mark on the region, as well as the infamous Wars of the Roses between the House of York, represented by the White Rose, and the House of Lancaster, represented by the Red Rose. And to this day, the White Rose remains the symbol of Yorkshire, and the old rivalries with its neighbours in Lancashire are recalled in, hopefully, a more friendly way in sports, especially in cricket. With the onset of the Industrial Revolution, Yorkshire became a hub of industry, and still is today. In particular, it was the hub of the coal, wool and steel industry, and the landscape of Yorkshire's cities was dominated by mills, as described in the well-known hymn Jerusalem, which mentions England's dark satanic mills. Yorkshire people, or Yorkshire folk, as we like to call ourselves, are very proud of their culture and heritage, including the instantly recognisable accent and dialect. In the past, it was possible to even pinpoint where someone came from, the exact town or even village that a person came from, just by listening to their accent. You could easily tell whether a person was from Bradford or Leeds or Sheffield by their accent. But in recent decades, these variations have begun to merge into one generic version of Yorkshire, with the possible exception of Hull, where slight differences can still be heard. The dialect itself is also fading over the years, although there are still plenty of words that are in common usage. And some of these can be found in Yorkshire's unofficial anthem, the song known as Ilkley Bar Tat. It's a song set on Ilkley in West Yorkshire, where it's quite windy and open to the elements. So if you go to Ilkley on a windy, cold day, don't forget to take your hat. The words of the song go like this. Where hast thou been since I saw thee? Where have you been since I saw you? On Ilkley Bar Tat. On Ilkley Bart means without, and at is a hat. I've been on Ilkley without my hat. And the rest of the song, in which there are many, many verses, explains what might happen to you if you go on Ilkley without your hat. The second verse goes, Thou's been a courting Mary Jane. You've been courting Mary Jane up on Ilkley. The next verse, Thou's bound to catch thy death of cold. You're going to catch your death of cold if you go up on Ilkley without your hat. Then we shall have to bury thee. We'll have to bury you, 'cause you died. Then t'worms'll come and eat thee up. The worms'll eat you up then when you've been buried. Then ducks'll come and eat up worms. So the ducks will eat the worms. Then we shall go and et up ducks. So we will eat the ducks then. And the last verse, then we shall all have eaten thee. So it's a song about the circle of life. I'm not going to punish you by attempting to sing the song here, But if you download the worksheet for this lesson, there is a link to a modern and rather lively recording of this song featuring some well-known Yorkshire characters on Ilkley Moor with some beautiful views of Ilkley Moor. Yorkshire has also inspired lots of great literature, and possibly its most famous literary connection is the Bronte sisters, Charlotte, Emily and Anne Bronte, who lived in the village of Haworth in West Yorkshire, and the parsonage, which was their family home, is now a museum telling the story of the family and their work. The moors above Haworth are portrayed particularly vividly in Emily's novel Wuthering Heights, as well as Charlotte's Jane Eyre and Anne's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, and many other of their works. So here is a sample now of Yorkshire dialect taken from Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. It's Mester nobbut just buried, and Sabbath no o'ered, and sound at gospel still in your lugs, and ye Darby Lakin, shame on ye. Sit ye down, ill childer, there's good books enough if you'll read 'em. Sit ye down and think o' your souls. This comes from very early on in the novel, and the children are being told off because it's the Sabbath day and they're meant to be behaving themselves. So what is going on here? What is the character saying? T, which appears several times in this little extract, is the word the. It's the shortened version of the word the. So mester is the master. Nobbut means only. So the master has only just been buried. He's only just died. And Sabbath, no o'ered. So the Sabbath isn't even over. And sound at gospel still in your lugs. Lugs are ears. Because it's the Sabbath, they've been listening to the gospel earlier in the day, and so it's still in their ears. And ye Darby Lakin. Dar, dare, and laking means playing. So they're daring to play on the Sabbath day when they should be being sober and serious. Shame on ye, ye being you. Sit ye down, ill childer, naughty children. There's good books enough if you'll read 'em. Sit ye down and think of your souls. Another author with a very strong Yorkshire connection is James Herriot. Although James Herriot wasn't a Yorkshireman himself, James Herriot is the pen name of James Alfred White, who actually came from further north. He was born in Sunderland and studied veterinary medicine in Glasgow. And when he qualified as a vet, he came down to work in Yorkshire. And he wrote many very entertaining books, of which this one, If Only They Could Talk, is the first. And a few decades ago, they were made into a very popular TV series. Herriot's style is very chatty, and he has a wonderful way of describing the often comical characters that he meets along the way. Being a vet in a rural part of North Yorkshire, a lot of the people he came across were farmers, and among them were some very interesting characters. So let's have a look at one brief episode. It's from the beginning of the book, when Herriot has just arrived in Yorkshire and he's waiting to meet his supervisor, Mr. Farnan, who it turns out has gone out. So he's having to deal with all the customers who are coming to see Mr. Farnan and whom he doesn't yet know very well, including this gentleman. I opened the door and looked into a round, eager face. Its owner, a plump man in Wellington boots, leaned confidently against the railings. Hello, Mr. Farnan in? Not at the moment. Can I help you? Aye, give him a message when he comes in. Tell him Bert Sharp of Barrow Hills has got a cow what wants boring out. Boring out? That's right, she's nobbut going on 3 cylinders. 3 cylinders? Aye, and if we don't do summat, she'll go wrong in a ewer, won't she? Very probably. Don't want to felon, do we? Certainly not. OK, you tell him then. Ta-ta. I returned thoughtfully to the sitting room. It was disconcerting, but I had listened to my first case history without understanding a word of it. The man is very pleasant. We're told he has an eager face, and he's very polite, but James Herriot doesn't understand a word he's saying. He uses words like summat and nobbut. What do they mean? Summat means something, and nobbut means nothing but. And he says I for yes. And then he does other things like dropping his H's. He says hello, and he says him when he's talking about him. So that's confusing already because Herriot hasn't yet got used to the way people in Yorkshire speak. But also, the farmer is using terminology connected with cars. He's saying she's nobbut going on 3 cylinders and she wants boring out. So that too adds to the confusion. Let's have a look now at some more Yorkshire words and expressions and the way that Yorkshire people speak. Looking at pronunciation first, the vowels in Yorkshire are different to the way vowels are pronounced in the south of England. The vowels tend to be shorter and harsher. We would say path, whereas further south they would say path, and grass, whereas in the south they would say grass. And the letter U is pronounced O. So we would say cut with a much deeper vowel sound than would be used further south. And the letter O is often lengthened. So we would say grow instead of grow, although instead of although. And as we've seen in the 2 passages we've just taken a look at, Yorkshire people very often, not always, but very often drop their T's and their H's. And the word the is often shortened to just the letter T. So Yorkshire people may very well reference the internet as tinternet. If we say, where's his hat? It's on his head. Where's his hat? It's on his head. And as I've already mentioned, the Yorkshire dialect has faded over the years as people have moved around and mixed together. Inevitably, language changes. But there are still quite a few distinctive Yorkshire words. For example, out and nout, which means anything and nothing. A popular Yorkshire saying is, you can't have out for nout. You can't get anything for nothing. Summat is something. I is yes. And all means also or as well. Any road is anyway. Sen means self, so you can have mysen, thysen, isen, hersen. Rate or reet means the same as right, but it's used in the sense of very in Yorkshire. Oh, that cup of tea's right grand it is. And often, contrary to grammatical convention, were is often changed to was. So you will hear Yorkshire people saying we was or you was. And them is often used when people mean those. For example, have you tried them biscuits? A up is a popular greeting. It just means hello. By heck is an exclamation meaning something along the lines of goodness me. Chuffed means pleased. For example, oh, I was chuffed to bits when I heard that. Love, if you go to Yorkshire, you will find people will call you love. It's not an amorous advance. They do it to everybody. It's just what you call people in Yorkshire, love. And there are still people in Yorkshire who use thee and thou, often shortened to thee and tha, for you. So for our writing prompt, go back and have another look at the James Herriot scene and read through it and imagine that you are James Herriot. It's now a few minutes later and Mr. Farnham, your new boss, whom you haven't yet met, returns. How would you recount to him the experience of meeting the farmer in the extract? As usual, there is a worksheet to accompany this lesson, which contains the extracts, the points we've discussed, some of the Yorkshire vocabulary, and also some recommendations for further reading and a link to the recording of Ilkley Mór Bartat. Thank you very much for joining me in this lesson. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And in the meantime, happy writing.